Okay, and we're live. Thank you guys so much for coming and to learn more about the trusted seed. I'm going to talk about why it's so important as an important piece of the common stack. But first I should share my screen. So the goal of this talk is really to help all of you guys understand how to bring DAOs mainstream. I think almost everyone that joined us today believes in the power of this technology. It's just how do we get normal people to use it? And the Common Stack has a specific strategy that's built around an observation that we've seen around what we call the trusted seed. So the trusted seed, in our opinion, is the key to successful commons and a successful DAO or a successful crypto network. All the networks that I've seen in the last 7 years that I've been in the crypto space have all started with a core group of aligned individuals that are obsessed with the long-term qualitative value that can be provided by the network, and they're not profit-driven. Let me kill Telegram. Oh, and you know what? I forgot. I have to share my screen in a different way for a later thing. Well, let's see. Well, we'll get there later. So the goal here is that if you're going to try to kickstart a decentralized network or any DAO, you want to make sure that the core people that are starting it are, number one, aligned with the vision and aligned and all share the same idea of what they're building. And number two, actually want to produce value. It's not about making money. And you can see this in Bitcoin. Bitcoin obviously is the first DAO and the first crypto network. And it was started by Satoshi, who never sold any of his first tokens. He was over here creating money, but he wasn't creating money to enrich himself, himself or herself. Satoshi was creating money so that because they believed in the future value of the network. And they thought that was so important that even though they collected millions and millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, they never sold it. And this is also true with Ethereum. The Ethereum Foundation holds hundreds of million, at least $100 million still worth of Ether. And they're not just selling it on the market to enrich themselves. They're only using it to support the Ethereum network itself. But if you look at the long tail of what I call shit coins, or also the long tail of failed DAOs, they are usually started either by profit-seeking individuals or the people who start them are just not quite aligned. And this is a really core piece of something that I hope everyone can observe, because it's somewhat challenging to say this because there's this ethos of decentralization, but to create a decentralized system that everyone can trust and to bootstrap that network, you actually need to start with a really solid foundation of aligned individuals, even though that might seem somewhat centralizing. And this is something we take to heart with the Common Stack. So the Common Stack's goal is to create sustainable funding for communities that want to support public goods. And what that will look like in the long run will be having anybody who would want to start a nonprofit or start some sort of community organizational group, that they can come in and they can come to the Common Stack and have their hand held through the entire creation of their own economy, their own economic system that revolves around creating the value that they want to create in a sustainable way. And so to do this, we need to build a foundation of tools and really document those tools to enable these people to come in and launch successful DAOs around their ideas of what their community needs. And in our case, we call these DAOs commons. There's this really great video by David Boyer, which I don't think honestly that I can play because Zoom isn't always friendly, but it's really worth looking at. If you guys have a chance to see this interview with Commons and you want to learn more, check it out. But I'm just going to keep going. So one of the things, the way David Bollier, and I should say that there is, the reason we call our DAOs commons is because there is a rich, there's a lot of research into this idea of commons in the academic space, mostly derived from the work of Elinor Ostrom, who won a Nobel Prize in economics for actually disproving the tragedy of the commons. She has many contemporary researchers, such as David Bollier and also Michelle Bowens, who have really inspired the Common Stack and how we want to build our systems and what's important and what is needed to prioritize. And I'm just going to read David Bollier's definition of a commons. A commons, and you could also think of this as a DAO, is neither the resource, the community that gathers around it, nor the protocols for its stewardship, but it is the dynamic interaction between all of these elements. And let me just give an example of that. Think of a Moloch DAO, right? I know some people may not know exactly how it works, but that's okay. Think of a Moloch DAO with, let's say 20 people in it that all come together and they all throw in 1 ether each. And when they're coming in, they believe that the money they put in is actually something that they share, and that they're going to coordinate together on and decide together how it is spent, because it's not necessarily, in their opinion, theirs, but it's the DAOs. And let's say that they really understand how to use the Moloch software. They know exactly how to go to Pokemall and vote, and they're fully informed on the rules in the system. Now let's imagine that these same people each join another DAO on Aragon. Aragon has basically the exact same thing as the Moloch DAO called the Dandelion DAO. And they have the same rules, right? But in this case, when everyone puts the 1 ether in, they think that ether is theirs. They have the power to rage quit in both systems, but in the Aragon system, if they don't agree with consensus, then maybe they will be a little more aggressive about it, because it's not a shared fund, but really it's their portion of a shared fund. And also maybe they don't fully understand how the Aragon UI works, and they don't know how the smart contracts really work, and they feel kind of different. So you have, in both of these DAOs, you have the exact same people, you have the exact same resources, and you have the exact same rules on how to govern those resources. But I bet you could imagine that they would have very different outcomes, because it's not just important to have these pieces in place. It's about how those pieces work together and the relationships between those pieces that really drive the success or failure of these communities. And in the common stacks, our commons are well, they're a little special. So David Bollier's commons, they're more of a shared resource community, and they start with a lowercase c. Our commons start with a capital C because they're DAOs, and the protocol is DAOified, and we want to make sure that people know that we're talking about our style of commons and not just a commons in general. And the biggest piece that makes our commons different than a normal commons that is cited in academic research is that we always include an aligned incentive system, a funding layer, something that creates an economic layer that will reward value that's being produced within the commons. Oops. One thing from the commons research that's clearly abundant is that commons are complex, adapted, dynamic systems. What that means is they're very sensitive to initial conditions. They're basically, there's a whole field of research around complexity science and the chaos theory that basically states that the initial system, the initial setup for any system that is complex in this way is very, very important. And coming into the space with this just DAO it attitude, while fun and really important for prototyping the tech, it's unlikely and it doesn't look like it has succeeded to this day as a strategy for creating successful commons. So don't do that. What I will do that if you want to test the tech, right? And you're okay for the project to fail. But if you want a project to succeed, especially if you're creating an economy, you know, if you're creating a metacartel style DAO that's more of a charity DAO, where everyone's putting their money in and they know they're going to lose it and that's okay, that's a much easier thing to kind of just DAO it with. But if you're trying to create an economic system like MakerDAO has succeeded at, or DXDAO has succeeded at, you're going to want to look at what they've done. They spent time on the cultural build. In fact, the cultural build is probably the longest piece of the design of your DAO. And during this cultural build, the most critical layer that needs to be nailed down first is, what is the value that your DAO is going to create? I'm going to start talking about commons, but in your mind, you can just replace DAO with commons because we call our DAOs commons. So if you're creating a commons, what is the value that you're building this for? Why are you here? You know, that determines everything else. Like if you want to start, I gave a talk yesterday about a bonding curve commons. If you want to create a bonding curve commons, is your goal to like change the world and change the economic system and get every national currency to use a bonding curve? Or is this just a coalition for like ICO groups that want to, you know, build CAD models to make their systems more efficient? This needs to be defined. And then once you understand the value you want to create, then you can start building the mission statement, the goals, the vision, you know, what are the values that you as a community want to uphold, and what is the long-term goals versus short-term goals of this endeavor, right? And very important is figuring out the actual processes and procedures and making sure everyone is aligned and has the same expectations on how things are going to move forward. You need to make a plan. You need to look at all the important dimensions, the legal side, the technical side, the social side, the money side, you know, and all these things need to be explicit and aligned. Making roadmaps. This is a project. Building an economy might require a project manager. Sorry, it's just how it is. And it's also important that you respect the research that's been done by Elinor Ostrom and her contemporaries around commoning. And Elinor Ostrom has just these really 8 simple rules and principles around governing a commons. It's great, of course, to do more research, but at the very least, just write those down and write down answers to them. And once you have all of this work done, right? You've done a DAO canvas or something like that. Then go out and talk to the next group of stakeholders, right? Who are you actually going to use this with? Once you launch it for yourself, if it's an economy, the whole point is for it to grow. So make sure you go out the next layer and get feedback from the people that you want to be the next adopters, and give them a heads up on what you're doing, and then change, like take their advice, respect their opinion, and change what you want to do, even if it's not as technically fancy. Maybe they don't care about decentralization. Maybe it's okay if you are a custodian of their keys. You know, there's going to be little pieces and parts that, depending on who you're working with, they might have different values. In the common system, for the initialization phase, we have a specific thing that we call the hatch. But it really doesn't matter what your initialization system is. The most important piece for the initialization are the people who are starting it. The early adopters will set the vibe of the commons. They will say whether it succeeds or fails. So again, you know, there's this other idea that we should just start these systems completely decentralized. And I think that you can probably do that a lot better when it's something like source cred or something like a mining system, like a decentralized network where anyone can contribute hardware. That has a better likelihood of being completely open and permissionless. But if you're going to start with who do you want to invest in your system and bootstrap a system with capital, you really don't want to just let anyone in. We saw this with the ICO era. That allows people who think they can make a profit to just pump and dump your coin, which is horrible for the people that are involved. So even though this is counterintuitive, it's something that we've seen and observed that it's important to actually be exclusive with who you allow to enter your system. You want to start with superstars. You want to have, you want to have a system that will set them up for success. So I'm going to talk more about these values of early adopters in a little bit, as I've already really I'm trying to nail them home. It's one of the most important things that I want people to take away from this talk, is that the people that start this system are value driven and know how to achieve the mission and are experienced and actively engaged, which is very important. But you also need to set them up to be that way. You have to make sure that the people who put skin in the game are rewarded and appreciated for actually putting in the effort, and that it's fair for everyone, that there isn't two sets of rules for different groups of people. And if people are doing a good job, they're rewarded, and if they do a bad job, they're actually penalized. Graduated sanctions is an important principle for governing a commons. And we have to respect that, even if it's difficult to want to impose graduated sanctions. There needs to be a solution for it. Also, you really want to make sure that the early adopters with their skin in the game are locked in. In crypto, I don't know why, but it's like we just forgot about the idea of vesting. It's in the normal world, when you're creating financial assets, that's a critical component, and it's there, and it's basically monitored very heavily by the SEC, and there's requirements for vesting. But in the crypto space, we haven't self-regulated to impose those. So I would encourage everyone to impose vesting requirements for anyone who's starting the system, and in the common stack that's built into our design. So let's talk about how we set up our what we call our hatch, which is the initialization of commons, so that it can align with and set up early adopters for success, so that it's easy for them to come through and kickstart these systems. So the first thing that I want to make sure to mention is that we are bootstrapping systems with capital. This is whether for good or for bad, this is the early design that we're choosing. If your community doesn't have people with excess capital, this design isn't going to work for you, but that's okay. You can also bootstrap systems with source cred. You can bootstrap systems with mining equipment. There's lots of ways to bootstrap systems, but it's worth mentioning. So in our system, those awesome early adopters, those superstars that you collect, they know coming in that they need to throw down some cash. They need to get some DAI and put it in a pot. And when they do that, that money is split between two pots. The reserve, which is the funds that will back the value of the token and create an economy that people can trust. And then the funding pool. And the funding pool is the really exciting piece, the meat. It's basically the donation pool. This is the money that's set aside only to build projects for the cause that you believe in. So everyone you can just put a cause in your mind. What do you want to build a commons around? The best commons are not projects, but they're actually a cause, right? That multiple projects want to work together on to coordinate between each other. So if you think of a cause, you can just kind of put that in your head while I explain how these commons works. So let's say these hatchers put down 500K. During the cultural build, they decided that 60% of the funds that would be raised during the hatch would be sent to the reserve, and 40%, what we call the hatch tribute, would be sent to the funding pool. When money hits the reserve in a bonding curve, that will create tokens. And since this is the initialization of the system, we have specific rules, because if there's one thing that everyone knows about bonding curves, at least people who are financially, that are using bonding curves for financial purposes. In general, in almost all the designs, you want to be the first person to buy in to a bonding curve. That's when the price is the cheapest. And generally the price goes up as more people have contributed to the collateral, to the reserve. And so because this is the most opportune time to support a commons and support a bonding curve, then we have special rules. Number one, the hatch tribute is there. Number two, the tokens that are created are vested, they're locked. They can't just be sold right away. There's some kind of requirements that have to be met before these tokens are unlocked and can actually enter the economy. And this is because of slippage. This idea is generally called slippage. And it's the fact that when they started buying the very first token in this bonding curve was worth 0 cents, maybe 0.00001 penny, right? And that means that the average price over the whole bulk buy of this 500K was actually 10 cents. And so when they put 500K in, they created 5 million tokens, right? And of those 5 million tokens that were created, each one is now worth on the market, according to the bonding curve, 20 cents. But that's not actually its value. That doesn't actually address the value that's in the reserve that's backing the token. So you can see here, there's only 300K in the reserve, and the token's hatch price was 10 cents. So there's 5 million tokens. So effectively, each token is worth 6 cents. And the hatchers know this. They know that there's actually almost 2 prices for this token. There's the price in the open market, and then there's the price if they fail. And if like they all just decide to fall asleep and not really develop the system and just all sell their tokens as they become vested, then they know that each token is actually worth 6 cents. But on the open market, each token can be created for 20 cents. And this psychology actually creates a really healthy dynamic for the hatchers to incentivize them to develop the economy, because they know that if they do a bad job at spending the donations, then no one will come in and join their system. They won't contribute because who cares? They're doing a bad job. But if they do a good job and they actually spend the funds in the way that the community wants, then they will develop a good relationship with the external world, and people might join their effort. I don't want to go deep into how the open phase works and exactly those dynamics. You guys can ask me about that later, because I'm really trying to focus on the initialization of the system. But the one thing I want to mention is that if this system succeeds, it's revolutionary. We can take nonprofit systems like projects that would normally, and projects and causes that normally have horrible times finding business models that can generate value for the people to continue to work to produce the value they want to see. We can actually reward contributions to public goods through an economic system, through a sustainable and regenerative commons economy. But if it fails, which as we've seen in the DAO space, DAOs fail. But if it fails, well, we're no better, the hatchers are no worse off than they would be using a normal nonprofit. They simply donated a lot of money to a cause they believed in, and while retaining active decision power over how the donations were spent. In many ways, it's better than the nonprofit system, even if it fails, because the people who all put their money in now have a way to coordinate on the expenditure of those funds in an efficient and transparent way. But let's dive a little bit deeper into these hatchers. So the Common Stack's goal is to actually allow anyone who wants to create value for a community to be able to start a regenerative commons economy. So they need to be value driven and not profit driven, obviously. They need to be experienced with the community and the people that there are. Like, I can't come in and start a Black Lives Matter community currency. It's just never going to work. They need, the people that are designing these things need to be part of that community themselves. They also need to understand the tech that they're working with. And they need to know how to use that tech to actually achieve the mission that they're going for. They need to have a certain mindset to kind of hold both these worlds of cooperation, where you want to work as a team, but also be competitive and innovative and try to improve your system. And of course, they need to be actively engaged. But I think you can see that there's kind of two that are really difficult to settle on, specifically being experienced with the tech and knowing how to achieve the mission. And that's where the trusted seed comes in. So I'm finally getting to the point of this talk. Sorry about the rants, but we are creating a trusted seed. The goal here is to solve these two problems, to have a component that addresses the fact that communities that are coming into this space, they don't know how to use blockchain technology. They don't know how to create an economy that will actually succeed at producing the value they want to achieve. They have the other pieces. So we're hoping that the trusted seed can can close the gap for these real people and real projects in the mainstream that want to change the world with this technology. So of course, everyone in the trusted seed needs to be part of this. They need to be value driven. They need, ideally, the people in the trusted seed that participate in hatches for communities, they will be experienced with that community. They'll be actively engaged. But they really bring these two pieces. They understand how to use this technology and make it succeed. And so the Common Stack Trusted Seed is effectively a collection of pro-social, blockchain-aware individuals that support the development of sustainable funding for public goods. It's a sort of DAO for people that can start these systems with other groups. It's I was telling this we've been talking about this as a team, and Zargam said that it's a lot like a venture studio, which I didn't actually know what a venture studio was. But when I read about it, it's like, wow, this is exactly what it is. It's a group of people that want to support the creation of a bunch of startups, basically, but for public goods. And most important thing is this is the key for the Common Stack to succeed at our mission. Without the trusted seed, we'll never be able to get communities that want to build economies around causes to be able to actually use our tech and make it work. And so the Trusted Seeds mission is to support us in our efforts to build this system so that they can use it and be part of starting these commons, and also to be willing to support other projects too that they also believe in. And I think this is really easy because, as a Trusted Seed member, if someone is starting a commons about, helping puppies or something, and you are like very anti-neutering somebody, you're going to look at that puppy commons and you're going to be like, I'm not going to join that because they're all about spading and neutering for population control. And you're just going to, we're going to expect the Cstack token holders and the Trusted Seed to actually self-moderate. Yeah, and so the benefits of joining the Trusted Seed is that it's an opportunity to be a founding member in a lot of these commons in a startup way. And you also will get to choose which commons the Common Stack core team actually puts effort into supporting. And effectively, the Common Stack, we are going to rely on the Cstack token holders for supporting us as well. And so we want to reflect that back to you, that we appreciate that support and really focus on limiting access to people outside our community, outside of the Trusted Seed, to us, and so that we can specialize in talking to you guys and getting feedback from you about how we're doing. And also, one of the interesting benefits of the Common Stack setup that we've been able to innovate on is a legal shield. Basically, anyone who joins the Trusted Seed, and eventually we'll have a requirement, one of the legal requirements is that you'll have to donate 1 DAI to us, but at least 1 DAI to like certify that you're a member of the Common Stack the Common Stack Association in Switzerland. So this acts as a legal shield for you so that you can join these DAOs without having to worry about being part of a general partnership or and somehow being individually liable for the actions of any DAOs. The requirements are pretty simple. I mean, first, you just have to apply. And when you apply, you have to pass our trust tests. I think I talk about this in a little bit too. And once you are accepted in the Trusted Seed, you're actually not just in the Trusted Seed. We actually require that you have skin in the game so that you somehow contribute to the Common Stack. This can be by even just retweeting us and supporting us in some kind of active way that's visible, or it can be contributing funds. And the other thing is that we actually monitor the Trusted Seed. So we want to make sure that we follow Ostrom's principles for the trusted seed, and that there are graduated sanctions for people who are not withholding the cultural agreements of the trusted seed. So if let's say that you start joining all of the commons that you possibly can, and then write bots so that you're just automatically selling the tokens to and extracting value from participating in these systems, we're gonna take away your Cstack tokens. Now, we cannot actually take away your commons tokens in the commons system. Once you have any commons tokens, they're yours. But we're going to stop you from joining other commons because you're giving the trusted seed a bad name. But for the most part, that kind of process is going to be heavily monitored, and we already have a transparent record of burns because we do have the Common Stack core team. We have these CSUM tokens, which that micro like multisig basically has the power to burn tokens if people are misbehaving. And yeah, so if you want to join the Trusted Seed and bring Commons mainstream, please consider applying to the Common Stack application. We have really cool shirts for people who are part of the Common Stack, and we're going to start really kicking up the Trusted Seed engagement because now we are starting to have a pretty big community. After you apply, as I said before, we're going to review your application and understand who you are. Lorelei is actually in charge of this. Anyone who applies, she basically stalks you on social media. And we decide by looking at you whether or not we think we can trust you and that you'll be a good member of our community. And within usually about a week, you'll get an email and that alerts you that says, hey, you joined the Trusted Seed, congratulations. And but you really are not part of the Trusted Seed until you have skin in the game. And so this is why we have the Cstack token. The Cstack token is a non-transferable reputation token. It represents the skin in the game that you've contributed to the Common Stack. And eventually, this Cstack token will actually be connected to a whitelist that where we place a cap on people based off of how much we trust them. At this stage, we don't fully understand how the Cstack token will work and what the total supply will be. It's still early days, so we are not implementing the cap basically on Cstack tokens yet. But that's also because there isn't anyone who's contributing to the Common Stack right now that is seeing that as a for-profit opportunity. It's very early days, and it's going to take a while before we have commons that people can join and see this as an opportunity to start extracting profit. But the real magic here is that with the Trusted Seed, like the reason that we're measuring the skin in the game is because that signifies that how many tokens you are allowed to buy in each of the hatches that are created with the Common Stack tools. And I can talk more about that in the Q&A. Which is where we are. Oh man, I'm so sorry. That was a way longer rant than I expected, but I will unmute you guys and maybe answer some questions. Okay. Oh. So yeah, I hit the wrong button. Okay.
I know that we had a little bit of a hot discussion on a question that was thrown into the chat here by Adrian. I don't know if you want to start with that. I'm trying to find. The question was, can the Commons vote to update the initial conditions as necessary?
This is, of course, going to be determined by the technical build. It's really hard to say. There are people that are, I think Jeff might be able to answer this better than I can, actually. Are you there, Jeff? Because he's been working on what we're calling, oh man, I can't remember the name. That's why I wanted Jeff to answer it. But basically kind of an exit and then a rehatch.
Right. So the augmented bonding curve, as it's been scoped out for the common stack, is very feature minimal, and we do this on purpose because we want to produce the kind of like minimum viable template and allow people to continue adding functionality on top of that. So while we talk about things like the hatch, which is kind of the initialization of the bonding curve, there is also, additional functionality that could be added for a rehatch, which I mentioned in the comment. The Red Cross community inclusion currencies are looking at to scale their initiative. So in the beginning, they may have, $40,000, and then they need to kind of rebalance their curve at $400,000 when they have so many more users. So there is the technical possibility to do that. Although with the common stack functionality, we're trying to keep scope minimal and allow it to be modular, and those components can be added as needed by communities that are using these tools.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I see another one that I definitely want to answer. That was something about how do you redeem Cstack tokens? You cannot redeem Cstack tokens. They have no value. So they have no quantitative value. They're a non-transferable reputation token. The commons tokens, which are the tokens that actually are attached to a bonding curve, they will be very redeemable, probably still not transferable, but you'll be able to actually redeem them into a bonding curve. Cstack tokens represent your reputation in the trusted seed. They only have value in the fact that they will allow you to access and purchase tokens in other people's hatches, in multiple commons hatches.
It's kind of like making you an accredited investor in these systems.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
What would be the easy way to get value of the commons tokens programmatically?
Well, there's no way. It's a qualitative thing. There's a certain challenge with quantitating qualitative measurements, and the Cstack token is not meant to have value.
No, not Cstack. The other tokens.
Oh,
yeah.
The commons tokens, it's very easy because there's a bonding curve.
Yeah,
and the bonding curve actually determines.
I'm still kind of trying to figure this out. So just call the Uniswap, or what? On which markets are they?
That will be dependent on the commons that launches them, but they don't have a market. They don't have to be on a market. The augmented bonding curve is its own market. So it determines the price algorithmically. So when you design the augmented bonding curve, you actually set the equation for the relationship between the reserve token, the collateral, which just call it DAI, and the commons token. So the simplest way to explain it is that you can imagine that each commons token, based off of when it is minted, will have a specific price set in advance. So the first token might be worth 1 penny. The 100th token, when created or destroyed, will always be worth $1. The 1000th token will always be worth $10. And you can kind of set this equation for the price. And then whenever someone sends DAI to the bonding curve, they'll have a predictable amount of tokens created. And whenever someone burns tokens into the bonding curve, a predictable amount of DAI will be released and given to them.
Predictable based on their specific token number, for example, right? So it's
yes.
So it's not possible to do something like CoinGecko API, like for 7,000 usual tokens, just to ping this token and get one value back. This is not possible anymore in such an easy way.
Yeah, that's possible. Well, because there's most of the price charts that we see are price versus time, right? And so the price will be at a price at any given time, and a bonding curve's price will actually look like any other price chart, but the price in relationship to the collateral in the pool is how we determine what the price is.
So thank you. It's possible.
I see another question around where can I see these Cstack tokens? And I don't know if someone can put a link to the Etherscan of the Cstack token.
Yep, will do.
Thank you. Are there any other, let's see, can we do work for the community and then have that payment just be put back into the commons as a donation? So actually, yes, thank you, August. That's a great question. So in general, people who just, are self-motivated and decide to do work for the common stack, we don't just pay them. We never pay them with money. It's just, we're basically a nonprofit ourselves, and we don't have ICO money to do that with. So we reward people with skin, because they put skin in the game, we can actually reward them with Cstack tokens. And we do this by using the praise. So if you guys have joined the main Telegram channel, t.me/commonstack, which I assume most of you have, then you will be able to see occasionally this like dish praise to this person or these people for doing all this great work. And then at the end of every month, the Common Stack core team, specifically Lorelei, Jeff, Chris, and I, we get together and we look at all these things and we actually dish out Cstack tokens based off of the work people did. Sometimes people actually do get paid for working for the Common Stack because I don't actually get paid. We do all of our payments transparently on Giveth. So if you want to see where money goes that's donated to us, you can see exactly what we spend every DAI on. It's listed on our Giveth campaign. And because Jeff, Chris, Lorelei, and I are dishing praise, we don't end up getting any Common Stack tokens for the work that we put in. But the community, the outer community, the people who aren't in that decision box about dishing praise, like Michael Zargam, who's part of the core team, well, although he doesn't get paid, so he's not a great example. But we have other people who get paid for working on the Commons Simulator, which is a project that we have funding for. We'll dish them tokens as well, and they'll get Cstack tokens and money because they're putting skin in the game, and they're also developing knowledge that we believe will help future commons. So it's important to give them tokens and get them in the trusted seed. But also, we usually will give them less than the people who are doing work without money because they have less skin in the game because they're getting paid. So it's at this point, it's a very subjective, simple process that's just governed by us four. One day, maybe we'll integrate SourceCred. They've gotten really far along and we love the work that they're doing. It's really cool. And it's actually an experiment that's going on right now with AuraCred in the token engineering community. And it's a much less subjective way to distribute reputation within a community. But we decided to kind of cut scope and just do it the simple way. Let's see. So David asks, he says his question is related to the possible exploration of the technical options to include many community tickers, so this information can be trusted and not manipulated.
I'm still here. Let's explain.
Oh, yeah.
This Hodlinks package is 2 years old, but it was using CoinMarketCap and it was written in LiveScript, but now it's updated and using CoinGecko, and it seems to be downloaded like last week, 1,000 downloads, and it's because it works great. But I want these newer tokens which are not easily available, from the CoinGecko and stuff. So to implement these things, so I'm learning.
Yeah, it should be easy. I mean, they implemented Uniswap, right? So I go to CoinGecko to look at the Panvala token price.
Oh, so they did. So maybe then I don't have to do anything because they are doing it. But if CoinGecko is not doing something, then I would like to have this modular. So maybe these communities can just write like 10 lines of JavaScript and get their token included in the Hodlinks package, which can later be included in some other. But yeah, I will
Yeah,
This is
I mean,
one thing, but yeah.
one of the big things that I hope to see with the commons communities is that they're not so focused on the price. The price
Exactly.
is important, but it's
This is
not
stupid,
the,
I know, but people, newcomers always blah, blah, but we have to have this trusted ticker, if anything, but I agree with that. Okay, thanks. I have to go. Bye.
Thanks, David. Thanks for joining.
I've got a comment and 2 questions.
Yeah.
Well, hi, pleased to meet you all. I'm Brendan Marr here. So I found it really fascinating when you were talking about the hatch and the 2 prices, because that's exactly the way preferred shares work, right? You have your common pricing, and then you have your preferred, and your preferred cannot actually be priced very easily for the mere fact that you have the multiple conversion ratios and different events that cause different, pricings to occur, and you don't know what the pricing is until it happens. So it's not like you're reinventing the wheel. It's
No.
pretty fascinating in that regard. But that might be really good in terms of having that as in your back pocket to whip out, so that when it comes down to throwing this out there to the broader market, they'll realize that it's not so different than what we currently have in place. In a lot of
I want to respond to that comment before your questions, because exactly, we don't want to recreate the wheel. Honestly, there's way too much innovation in this space, way too much, all at once. And it's like, there's simple systems that have worked, like vesting, seed round, like venture capital. We're basically just following the venture capital system. We're not trying to do anything.
You're just doing it way better.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's nice to hear.
At least from what I can see.
And
So
we're doing it with a different purpose. We're trying to
Yeah.
do it for creating economies around causes, as opposed to trying to create profits for shareholders. But yeah.
Yeah, we can't negate that. That's actually the point, right?
Yeah.
A question for you. So the simple agreement for future governance, the SAFGs are kind of new, and I was wondering, it seems like almost that they might be able to be worked into this, because they're kind of like, how do you say, reputation in a certain way. They can kind of fill that role, and I was wondering what your thoughts on where that might fit in. And
can you say that again? Not the SDGs, the SF what?
the SAFG.
I don't know what that is.
Okay, it's an agreement. It's the simple agreement. You've heard of SAF.
Oh, like a SAFT?
It's like a SAF, but it's the last term is G for governance.
Oh, cool.
So they're it's basically a contract which is non-transferable, and has no monetary value, which is kind of what you're talking about here in a lot of regards. But it's rights to governance only. So yeah, that might be something that will fit into this.
I will definitely need to research that more, because the legal piece is a huge part of the cultural build. And I just want to say, like, in Giveth, before I understood Eleanor Ostrom, like, Giveth has been around for 3 years and we don't have a legal entity at all. Luckily, we're very much just moving donated money around for communities, or supporting them and doing that for themselves. So it's really hard to have any problems. But I think it's really important that we respect the 4th principle of Eleanor Ostrom's rules, and making sure that people have a legal strategy for interacting with the outside world. So, yeah.
I'll send you some links, Griff. And the third or second question I have is if you could shed some more light on the simulation of the initial conditions, because in emergent systems, that is everything. And how you're, to what extent in your development are you, and how are you wrapping in the CAD stuff in an implementation? I mean, where are you at with that, just to give me a feeling?
Yeah, so we have a full beta simulation of our system, including the hatch, the augmented bonding curve, and conviction voting. Although it's not a perfect representation, we have simulated things, but it's one of those things where it's a chicken and the egg. Until we have some real data on a real system that existed and tried it, it's hard to say our simulations are worth a damn, you know? So,
Right.
but yeah, so it's one of those, it's like, I think it's important to have it in place and then actually launch the system and then back test the data.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
We're actually working on a new simulation of just a rewrite of the whole thing. We're doing this in the Common Simulator project. Andrew, I don't think he's in this call right now, but he's almost all the way through, completely rewriting the simulation so it's much easier to read and to work with. And he's just at the part where, okay, now we got to finish the voting part of conviction voting and tie everything together. So he's at the end, which might just be the beginning. We'll see. But once we have that system, what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a game around it.
Oh, cool.
It's called the Common Simulator, and it will allow people to set these initial conditions and then start iterating in a more manual way. It is a game. The game could be replaced by like just some simple machine learning like that, but it's a way to give an experience around using the simulation with like a fun story around it. So if you're interested in that piece, which it sounds like you might be, you should definitely join us. We have a weekly sync every week on Tuesday at 5 o'clock in Barcelona time. And obviously
We'll have to do the math.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, time zones are the worst, but yeah. And as far as like simulating these initial conditions, the way I would expect it to go is that once we have these simulations a little bit more robust, people will kind of set boundaries. Like when they want to do the hatch, they say, oh yeah, well, we know what value we want to create, and we at least need, let's say, like 200K in the reserve, in the funding pool, to even make this even a point. So then when they set the hatch, they say, hey, the hatch isn't over until either it's been 30 days or and we've reached 200K in the funding pool. You know, or maybe there's also a limit of like a minimum number of participants, or all these other factors that when you run the simulations 10,000 times and you can see correlations between failed commons, you can start saying, oh, well, these initial parameters need to be within these ranges. And then, you know, if maybe there's a cap of too many people in the initialization, and once you reach 30 people, no one else can join the hatch, you know.
That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
No, because you know what that means? It means that you just dumped a couple $1 trillion back into the economy, because if you actually do that, then you're not going to have all these kids trying to get, you know, $200 million ICOs to launch something they could actually launch for, like, you know, a couple $1,000s.
Wouldn't that be great? I mean, the bear market's coming, and people say the ICO craze is over. I don't buy it. Okay, when creating a currency is as simple as copy, paste, deploy, and all the currencies are going up in a stupid way, people are going to start creating them again. And if we don't have something better, like a better option, and for people to trust and the right ways to create these things, we're just going to see 2017 all over again, and a lot of wasted funds. But there were some other good questions here. So there's how does the hatch discover the price? And by Adrian, that's a great question, Adrian. Actually, what's really cool is in the cultural build, you can set the price. You can set the hatch price, and you can set the open price. We have a simulation on our website. Oh, in fact, looks like Can posted it. It's commonstack.org/ABC, and you can scroll down, or you can put the hashtag simulation, and you can see that based off of how you can actually set the two prices, and the piece that we will recommend that is kind of the unknown is the amount that is raised. And so during the hatch, the bonding curve actually is determined by the amount that is raised. The actual curve isn't drawn until after the hatch, and it's drawn to hit these 2 points based off of how much money was raised during the hatch. This is a visualization. Oh yeah, thanks, Chris. That's a great link. Cool. Well, hey, we're right on the hour. If you guys have any more questions, I'm happy to stay for another half an hour. But for the live stream, I want to end it because we're at the right moment. So thank you for joining us, and feel free to stay on, even though I'm ending the live stream, if you want to chat more casually in a conversation style. Thank you, guys.